Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Last First Date Radio, featuring interviews with experts in dating, relating, and mating in midlife. And now, here's your host, Sandy Weiner.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Sandy Weiner, and I am the founder of LastFirstDate.com. I am the dating and relationship coach for women over 40 who want to finally attract and sustain a lasting, loving relationship. It is never too late to have the love you deserve. And so whether you're single or in a relationship, this show has something for everybody. And I am so excited about my guest today. I will be speaking with Dr. Amy Banks. She's an author, a psychiatrist, and an expert in relational neuroscience. Dr. Banks is going to be speaking about how you can rewire your brain for better connection and better relationships. So we'll speak to her in a few minutes, and I just want to say that as a dating coach, it is my mission to help women over 40 recognize the qualities of a good man and to learn the relationship skills that you need to make love last, because it does take skill, and many of us don't have those skills. We weren't born with those skills. We don't have parents who model those skills, so we do need to learn them. And most women who come to me for support are wonderful mothers. They're successful in the workforce, but they do have challenges in the love department. And one of the mistakes that I notice that happens over and over again is that for women who grew up in the 60s and have worked hard to achieve success in the workforce, they often bring that same competitive edge to dating, and that can be a total turnoff to the men that they're attracted to. It makes them in the friend zone, or it makes men wonder whether they should date them or hire them. So it's very hard to know what kind of energy or messages you're putting out because you're too close to the situation, and that's why I have created a free guide for you to help you to learn the 3 most common mistakes that midlife daters make and how you can turn them around to find love. So please go to my website, and that's lastfirstdate.com, LASTFIRST date.com, and just sign up on my homepage for the free guide, and that will help you to identify those 3 mistakes that are most common among midlife daters and how you can turn them around and find the love of your life. Today's show is sponsored by Audible.com, a leading provider of spoken audio entertainment and information. You can listen to audiobooks whenever and wherever you like, and you'll get a free book when you sign up for your free 30-day trial at audibletrial.com/lastfirstdate. That's audibletrial.com/lastfirstdate. And now for our guest, Dr. Amy Banks. She was an instructor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, and she's now the director of advanced training at the Jean Baker Miller Training Institute at the Wellesley Centers for Women. She has a private practice in Lexington, Massachusetts, which specializes in relational psychopharmacology and therapy for people who suffer from chronic disconnection. She's also the author of a new book, 4 Ways to Click, Rewire Your Brain for Stronger, More Rewarding Relationships, and I am enjoying that book a lot. Welcome to the show, Dr. Banks.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you're enjoying the book. That makes me happy.
I've been talking about it a lot to everybody who will listen because...
Good. Please do that. Keep doing that. Yeah.
I am. I'm going to keep promoting it because I what I love about it is that you bring in the science of it, and I think a lot of people are not interested in science, and like you say in the second chapter, in the second part of the book, you can skip over the science if you want to, but you and I both love the science, and I'm sure many others do. And just knowing that there is a scientific reason for disconnection and for people having relational issues, it helps you to identify where in the brain it's happening and how to turn it around, because you give very specific ways for people to work on these areas that they have weaknesses. I love that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and what we know, I mean, I don't know where you're headed with this at first, but what we know is if you aren't aware, right, that you're changing your brain anyway, and you may be changing your brain or in a way that is kind of against the relationships you want. So it's not like you either going to or neutral, right? And that's the tough thing when you repeat these patterns over and over again. Keeps your nervous system locked right into whatever marginal or bad relationships you've been in.
True, and I think it also, for me, by reading some of the examples, and some are very extreme, like I think it was Juan who...
Juan, Poor Juan, yeah.
So if you can tell a little briefly about him, but, in his case, it was such an extreme example that happened at work, and this happens a lot where it first gets identified at work, but it's something, it's behavior that seeps into every relationship. So can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah. Let me tell folks a little bit about Juan. Juan was, someone that I've worked with that isn't a lot unlike a number of people that I've worked with, but Juan had that chronic just irritability, that quick trigger, and everyone knew that around him. He was prickly. People didn't approach him easily. In meetings, he was usually, kind of curt at best. And, the story that I tell is about one day when he was feeling particularly sort of just irritated with people. And, he happened to work in an environment, he's a computer guy, and he happened to work in an environment where the boss was actually trying to do a collaborative approach to meetings and, allow people to be heard and listened to. And, a lot of things that we know actually supports the nervous system and makes people work better, right? So he was doing that, but Juan's physiology wasn't tied into that at all. And in fact, he came one day particularly upset, irritable, and was in a meeting. He presented an idea, a junior person thought of another idea and brought it up, and he just went off, just snapped, yelled at the guy. Everybody was sort of dumbstruck just looking at him. He was basically dismissed from the meeting, and, long story short, his boss actually, who valued his technical skill greatly and his, wisdom around some of the technology stuff, really had been telling him the relational aspect is going to get you into trouble, and in fact, he worried he was going to be fired, but he was referred for counseling to try to get some of this under control.
Yeah, which I thought was such a good move on his boss's part.
Right.
So you helped him with his Smart Vegas.
Right?
So
this is a good example. In the book, the way that I talk about the science is to sort of break it down into 4 neural pathways that are needed really for a good, strong, healthy relationship. And there's a dance that goes on as you are in a healthy relationship. Those pathways are stimulated, hopefully in a positive way. They grow and develop, and the stronger those get, the more your relationships develop into healthy relationships. So there's this kind of feedback loop that can go for or against, and we're hoping, with some clearer instructions for people for. And so in Juan's case, we really were targeting what's called the Smart Vegas. And in the CARE program, that's sort of the first pathway I talk about. CARE stands for each one of these pathways, and hopefully by the end of today we'll cover them. But the C is, just as you said, the Smart Vegas. And most people don't know about this. This is really kind of new research done by Steve Porges that identifies a third pathway of your autonomic nervous system. So that's the autonomic is your automatic reaction, right? So for Juan, his automatic nervous system, most people think of as the sympathetic, that stress response, or the parasympathetic, which is your rest and restore, and then in the extreme lethal situations, it's your freeze response. But most people think about stress as really building up your sympathetic nervous system, right? And certainly that was the case with Juan. And when you go back in his history, you find out, of course, that he's had many very complicated, pretty destructive relationships that kept feeding and growing his stress response system, his sympathetic nervous system, causing him to always be ready to either fight or flee. Mostly he fought. And so the smart vagus, come to find out, we all have, all mammals have it, in fact, and it innervates the muscles of facial expression. So when you smile, when you move your mouth when you're talking, when you raise your eyebrows, right? And so often you think about what happens when you greet somebody that you feel relatively safe with. You usually smile. You usually, when that happens, your face lights up, you brighten. Your ears, those little teeny muscles in your inner ear are innervated by the smart vagus system. Your throat. And when that happens, when that's stimulated, it feeds into your sympathetic nervous system, and it basically says, stand down, you're not needed. And that's one of the ways that a healthy, safe relationship literally de-stresses us, helps us feel calm.
So, I was telling this actually to a friend of mine who had sexual abuse as a child, and mostly physical abuse and some mild sexual abuse from one of her parents. And her response is, I'm going to die. That's where it goes to. I'm going to be abandoned and I'm going to die. And so she has this state of panic that often happens, and she's been through a lot of therapy. I was telling her about the app that you describe in the book for biofeedback. So do you have a name for that app in case anybody's interested?
Well, there are a number of companies that are doing these, taking the concept of neurofeedback, right? So usually for many, many years, people were using biofeedback, which would measure pulse rate, your heart rate, that sort of thing. What these do is measure your brain waves, right? And at this point, you could go to a neurofeedback clinician who would hook you up and get a very sophisticated sense of how your brain is integrated. But what they do, there's a company called Plaxis, and trust me, I have no connection to them, financially or otherwise. But you can Google neurofeedback headset, and you can buy that. And then what you can do is download apps. I'm looking right on my phone right now that coordinate with that. And at this point, you put on this headset, plug it into your iPhone, and you can do kind of a concentration focus type of EEG stimulation, or you can do a relaxation. Can't find it on my iPhone. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. People can Google it. I just was curious in case anybody wanted to get an app to help them with that kind of response if they've had especially a traumatic childhood or things that they want to work on. There was a book I read a while ago when I was first getting into this business called Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott, and she gives different examples, especially in the workplace, of difficult conversations that people have when it comes to confrontation. And there was one case that reminded me of Juan, where there was a woman who didn't play well with others. She was a freelancer, and it was the same kind of thing where there was a lot at risk at stake with her not being able to be cooperative. And at the end, she did do the work. She helped herself. I don't remember how, but she was very angry at her boss for basically saying, you've either got to work on yourself or you're gone. And he was willing to train her, I think. And anyway, at the end, after they got the account and everything worked out well and she really transformed, she said to him, I want you to know that the night that you told me that, I was so angry at you, and I went home, I couldn't sleep. But by doing what you did, not only did you help me at work, but you saved my marriage. And that it's just, to me, that was so poignant, because I think people don't always realize the extent to which all this stuff goes.
No, exactly. And that these pathways for connection and relationship you're using in every relationship in your life, right? I mean, that's I make a point to point this out, because a lot of people will say, oh, my friendships are all good, and they may or may not be, but they miss the fact that maybe there's somebody at work that is really troublesome for them, or maybe they're that person at work, that's really troublesome.
Yeah.
And that impacts all of your relationships. It doesn't just, you can't lock it away at work. And so you're right. The trickle effect, if he taught her how to interact in a way that was, respectful and, could handle the conflicts that inevitably are raised in relationships without turning to being, furious, rageful, abusive, what have you, then that's a skill that goes across relationships, and it's critical.
It is.
Yeah.
Boy, there's so much I want to talk to you about in the book. So just want to talk about something you said in the very beginning at the book, which is that we have been raised to be independent, and thinking that we need to stand on our own, and a lot of therapy is about building independent skills, and then we are very bad at relationship because of that. Or I'm just paraphrasing. Can you address that, please? Because I think that's a really important concept.
Oh, I think it's a crucial concept. I mean, I like to say the meta message of the book is that we are all in a culture that undermines our pathways for connection, right? And the culture, it's the cultural norm, which I think does play out in our approaches to therapy. The norm is that a mature, healthy individual is, well separated and individuated from others. Right? Their boundaries are built up. They're not impacted. They're not, if somebody's mad at them, they're not going to fold. And it creates this illusion for people that they, in fact, can be these perfect, upright beings, right? Relationally, that they really should be able to stand alone, that relationships are, are nice but not necessary. And I think that is a huge myth that just undermines everybody's pathways, right? I literally last week on Thursday went to a high school in New York, in the Bronx, and I asked the kids, okay, talk to me about your definition of a mature, healthy adult, and within a short amount of time they started saying the usual, can do things on their own, all of these metaphors and cliches that we have about the self-made man or the whatever really undermines our ability to sustain these pathways in our relationships.
Yeah. So, and I hear it all the time because people in midlife are afraid to not be able to make it on their own, and they should be able to sustain themselves, but it's that fine line that people aren't willing to, that they walk, where they're not willing to take a wall down and open up and say, I actually need to be in relationship, that it's
exactly.
It's a really important part of our lives. It's a crucial part of our lives, and people don't recognize that. I had a client once who told a guy on a first date, I'm like very complete on my own. I have everything. I have the cake. I have all the ingredients. I'd like some icing, but it's just like,
right. What an
I don't
invitation,
really need
right?
you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
She wondered why he never called her back.
Well, exactly, right?
Yeah.
And that it's biologically important to us to both need other people and be needed. Right? I mean, that is a natural thing rather than seeing yourself or other people as needy, right? That causes that, once that gets really associated with relationships, that neediness factor, then, the switch to the stress response system happens all the time, right? You don't have the relationship sort of nicely embedded in these 4 neural pathways for connection, right? That concept. You want all of those wiring together, firing together, as you will, to give you that sense of security, literally in the world, that you're embedded in a community or in a set of relationships that sustain you.
It's really true. It's something I was reading in the book recently made me think about how we cope with our past relationships. So I don't remember which part it was, but you were talking about the people who have had difficult upbringings in particular, and how the things that you need to do to repair. And I think it might have been actually in the story about Juan, creating like the boundaries that he had to have with his father, and how he went with his sister and figured out when things would not be safe for him, what he would do in response, and
exactly.
And surround yourself with safe, healthy relationships, and so and those things are so important. And I remember having that awareness when I was in my 20s, and my father, I needed to start hanging up the phone on him because he really was doing things that were not appropriate for me.
Right. Yes.
And that was sort of the beginning of my understanding of creating boundaries that were healthy. And so, and he passed away about a week ago. So it made me really, well, I've been thinking a lot about, when we have complex relationships with our parents, and many of us do, it's what you do with it that matters. And
totally.
So can you talk to that about, you say in the book, our relationships live within us, and so we all have long histories of relationships, and so what about the people who haven't had healthy past relationships? Are they going to repeat history? Can they change history? Can they change the future?
Are they going to distance? So this is where I think the book is very hopeful for people. I hope when they read it is that, no relational template, no one single or even 5 bad relationships predict or determine your future relationships. The idea is to really be able to identify the qualities of a healthy relationship, right? The qualities of the relationships that you have in your life right now, and and how your neural pathways are functioning. So and you can see, it's remarkable if you do what's called the care assessment. You can literally see I want to say the echo or the stamp of those old relational templates. It may be some of the questions around trust, or I can turn to this person in an emergency, or that sort of stuff. And you're going to see the stamp. You're going to see, I have a hard time reading people. They confuse me. I can't trust. You're going to see that. And in seeing that clearly and understanding, okay, that's a neurological pathway, and what we know about these neurological pathways is that they are flexible and that you're able to change them if you have the right guidance, right? Then you can, sort of really identify, okay, this feeling that's coming up, I notice when I go, whether I go on a first date or I'm sure somebody's going to reject me, and then you can see, this is just, this is stamped. What am I going to do? How can I problem solve around settling my sympathetic nervous system, my stress response system, so that I don't feel abandoned before I even go on the date, right? What do I have to do to get myself a different kind of message coming through? Maybe you can't do it on your own. Maybe you need 10 text messages from a friend throughout the time that you're on the date, or maybe not 10. 10 would be excessive. That would take away from the date. But maybe you need 2.
Yeah, maybe you shouldn't be checking your phone on the date.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what do you need as a reminder of something different than that template that you have lived with, right? But it allows you sort of to create strategies out of the old bad relational templates that you have in the old relationships, quite literally.
Yeah, and you can feel that negative energy that somebody brings with them to dating or in any relationship. It's
in any
so
relationship.
Palpable. Yeah. You can feel somebody's lack of confidence or the messages that they're putting out. They don't realize they're broadcasting loud and clear, even though they are not saying a word.
Well, that's right.
And that you can. Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is they're broadcasting loud and clear, and we have the neurophysiology to pick up those messages, right? We don't need to be told that. I mean, that's part of, for instance, the resonance system. We will read that. We will feel that, even if you haven't told it to us, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's really true. And so And basically whatever you project is what you attract. So if you're saying I have a hard time reading people over and over again, you'll continue to have a hard time reading people. It's
That's right.
It's your old story that you keep telling yourself. And
that's right.
Yeah, we talked all about old stories all week during the week after my father died, and all the siblings were together, and boy, did all the old stories come up.
All the old stories,
so,
right?
Yeah, and that's all they are. And it's like we're all adults, and with the right guidance, like you say, we can change these stories.
That's right. That's right. Because it's when the stories just keep playing out, and I always like to, sort of tie that back to literally the rules of neuroplasticity or brain change, right? Which is use it or lose it. If you are playing out the same story over and over again, you are stimulating those pathways that basically shape your world into that story over and over again, right? And so, whether you think about setting up roadblocks in your mind, when your mind is gone from the present, you can see it just slides right into there to the past and the assumptions that you have about what this relationship's going to be like and, whatever. But to be able to reel that in, kind of stop it, get present, get centered. Okay, as you say, I'm an adult. This is 2015. Here I go.
Yeah. And it's interesting. There are a lot of people out there who say the best indicator for the present relationships are the person's past relationships, and I disagree. I think you need to look at them and see what patterns they've created, but people are so determined to know what happened in the past, what happened with your ex, why did your relationship fail, what did you do, and it just gets you into this conversation that may be totally irrelevant. And I know that I want to be seen for who I am today, not for who I was, because I wasn't the same person 10 years ago as I am today in terms of how I am in relationships. And you would hope that the person you're with has also done the work. And
that's right.
So it's but so many people do make those quick snap judgments based on the past.
Yeah, exactly. Right, and in those, snap judgments are always made out of fear. Right? I mean, they're not, which means, trying to protect yourself, which means you're operating actually out of your stress response system, rather than, the pathways of connection, which provide you actually more wisdom about relationships.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I've been really, I've been looking at the people in my life and how they respond to in conversation. How reactive they are, and I've been a lot more sympathetic since I've read your book, because I do understand that there's something misfiring there, and it's not. I don't get as angry as I used to.
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, think about that. That is a huge gift for that other person, right? Because that person who is reactive it's probably come from being in unsafe relationships of some level. They're reactive. They then see the reaction to their reactivity, which is some form of, kind of repulsion, rejection, whatever, and simply by being present differently on your end, you can help them dial back and maybe access some other pathways. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a tremendous gift.
Yeah, it's, I've gone through tremendous change since I became a coach, and just the way that I am in my own family, because the way I used to be was there was a certain tone that I would bring to conversation with my children, for example, that I wasn't aware of, except they very, very kindly made me aware of it at all times. And
yes, I know that phenomenon well.
It's amazing. But you know what? If you don't fight it and you really listen to the people who love you, there are a lot of great messages there, and it can really help you to become a better person, a better parent, a better everything. So I'm going to take a really quick break and just give another shout-out back to Audible.com, our sponsor, and then we'll get back to speaking to Dr. Amy Banks about 4 ways to click. So Last First Date Radio is very happy to be sponsored by Audible.com. They are a leading provider of spoken digital audio entertainment and information. And they have over 150,000 titles that you can choose from, and you can listen on any device, including whatever you're listening to Last First Date Radio on right now. So if you sign up at audibletrial.com/lastfirstdate, you're going to get one free audiobook and a 1-month trial of the service. So some of the books on the bestseller list right now on Audible are All the Light We Cannot See, great novel by Anthony Doerr, and 50 Shades of Grey, of course. Very popular now and talked about. The book Wild, which I'm reading now for my book club and really liking a lot better than the movie. The book Yes Please, which is by Amy Poehler, and because it's an audio book, you can hear Carol Burnett and Seth Meyers and her parents, Eileen and William Poehler, and Kathleen Turner. It's basically a dinner party with all of those people on it, and it sounds fascinating. Audiobooks are really fabulous if you're on the go, if you are driving long distances like I often do. It's so nice to be educated while you're in the car, on the treadmill. So you can go ahead and try Audible for your free month and free audiobook by going to audibletrial.com/lastfirstdate. And I want to thank you for your support of our radio sponsor, Audible, and for giving yourself the gift of spoken audio entertainment. Is your book on Audible yet?
It is, yes.
It is
on Audible.
Oh, so go out and get Amy Banks' book, 4 Ways to Click, Rewire Your Brain for Stronger, More Rewarding Relationships. There's a plug for your book again.
Thank you.
Sure. So
Yes.
We were talking before a little bit about family upbringing. So actually, if you can go through the 4 ways, because we haven't gone through all 4 yet, and,
Sure.
and just go through each one, that would be helpful.
Yeah. So as I said before, it's the CARE, C-A-R-E, and they stand for each one of these kind of pathways for connection. So C is for calm, and we talked about that, the smart vagus and its ability to settle down or help you feel calm and unstressed when you're in a healthy relationship. The A is for pathway. It's for a sense of accepted that you feel when you're in a good, healthy relationship or in a good, healthy group. And what that refers to is work that's done by Eisenberger and Lieberman out at UCLA, and they've done research on the neuroscience of being left out, if you will. And they did an experiment where they had people be left out of a cyberball experiment. And what they found was that, number one, most people felt uncomfortable or distressed by it just simply by being left out of a computer ball toss game, but that those who had a higher level of distress had this area in the brain, the dorsal anterior cingulate gyrus, become more activated. And so they looked, what did they know about that? And what they knew is that that is the same pathway that lights up with the distress of physical pain. So basically what is that saying is that for human beings, and again, because we are such interdependent organisms or animals, if you will, the pain, physical pain, is felt in the same area as social rejection or social pain. So being accepted and being having a group around you literally settles down your pain pathways, and that's quite literal when you are in chronic pain. People that are in chronic pain often feel more isolated, and when you're more isolated, your sense of pain increases. So it's, you can see this playing out on both sides. So that's the A. R is the resonance system, and what that refers to is the mirror neuron system, and it's kind of this interconnected series of pathways in our brain that allow you to read another person's actions, intentions, sensations, and feelings, right? It's the roots of empathy. And basically what is being shown is that the way that we understand and read people is by internally mimicking them. So if I'm reaching out to shake somebody's hand and you're watching me, in your mind, the area in your brain and the prefrontal cortex that's planning that action to shake someone's hand literally is activating. So it's as if you are doing it too, right? And so that we just intuitively, we feel other people. So that's R is for resonance. And then finally the E is for the sense of energy that we get in good, healthy relationships. And what that refers to is the dopamine reward system. So the extent to which the dopamine reward system remains attached to healthy relationships. So when we're born and, in those early years of being well attached, hopefully, to parents and community, when we're in a nurturing relationship, we get the cuddling, the holding, all of the stuff that goes into that. It literally stimulates that reward pathway that gives you a little hit of dopamine that provides pleasure, energy, a little more focus. And the idea is to keep building that pathway throughout your life and keep relationships close, right? So that's your best source of dopamine. So, going back to one thing we talked about earlier, when we raise people in a culture that devalues relationship and says you should be standing on your own, you can decouple those, right? You unpair those. The dopamine, and I think this is one of the things that is happening in our culture all the time, is people are searching for dopamine basically in all the wrong places. You can get dopamine from drugs of abuse, you can get it from shopping, you can get it from, anything that quick hit, right? So again, that's E for energy, and it's the extent to which good, healthy relationships really provide the focus and motivation that you need to be in your life.
Mm-hmm. And you do talk a little bit about how to take a brain that has addiction to things like you just mentioned and rewire it to receive dopamine in a healthier way.
Right. Yeah.
Which I think is really, really valuable. So say you don't have that healthy family, which a lot of people don't. And your ability to connect is not healthy. How can people rewire the neural pathways to connect?
Well, so as I said before, you do the assessment, sort of see. But if you don't, so the first thing is I really have people work on is something called a positive relational moment. And, I tell people if you've not had that, if you don't have that, then, maybe you are finding some reasonable connection, so if you really have come from an abusive place and you really don't feel safe with most people in your life, they aren't rich relationships, maybe it's a pet. I have a number of people that come from abusive backgrounds who start literally imagining or kind of holding on to the feeling that they have in their body and in their their whole being of being with a safe pet. And in fact, we know now, there's research being done that, dogs produce dopamine just as humans produce dopamine. So that is a very real thing. But creating positive relational moments, you might have it with a therapist, that moment that you really felt the therapist got you or something. You have to have something that gets stimulated over and over that's more positive. Does that make sense? And so there
makes sense to me.
It makes sense to you, right?
Yeah.
Right, because
you gave a specific example of something that you held on to that was a calm, positive relational moment with your children, right? Holding your two kids. And I do this all the time, but the one that I describe in my book, it just stands out. It was a time that I was with my kids. They were 13. I was at Yellowstone. We were heading off to the geysers, but they were just walking and they're holding my hands. They're just at that age where it wasn't quite as embarrassing to hold your mom's hand at 13. And just that feeling of this is, just I can breathe. I love my kids. They're great. They're funny. They're interactive, and they're not yet. They weren't at the time 16, which they are right now. I'm getting far fewer rewards, I have to say. But yeah, that's the kind of thing. So, and what I tell people is think about what you're feeding your brain, your pathways for connection, right? And a lot of people are just spontaneously feeding their brain a lot of, kind of sludge and goo about how, maybe incompetent they are or relationships are stressful. But what if and I have people actually do this, if you take 1 minute
and focus, like in your body and in your mind, on a positive relational moment, you will notice that your entire physiology changes. When I do this in workshops, people will do it literally. I time it for 60 seconds. And what they'll notice is their chest feels more expansive, they feel brighter, they feel lighter, their heart rate slows down. And it's really, you can feed that to yourself over. It becomes a practice, right? You're going into an exam. If you're a kid, you're going into an exam. Have those positive relational moments literally in your back pocket. When the stress starts creeping up, boom. Let's pause.
I have to teach that to my college student. My child, who's a college student, she gets very overwhelmed when she has a test to study for, and I often feel that she's just thinking of everything at once, like it's just one big pile of stuff sitting on her head. That's what it feels like to me. Yes. And so I help her to kind of sort through and take the steps to just say, okay, then I got to take this step, and then I got to take this step, and then it just becomes less overwhelming. But I think having her call up a positive relational moment will probably also help her. So I'll have to.
Exactly.
If she's open to hearing me.
I was going to say, and if she finds that helpful with you, really having her very consciously remember those moments that she's walked you that you've walked her through that. And it's not even so much the slow me down, it's the changing of the physiology to embody that interaction between the two of you that helps to slow it down. Right?
That's a good point. Right.
Yeah, it's not, and one of the things that, for instance, I've been teaching these high school students, who are in these crazily, high-pressured, high-competitive environments that, they're cramming. I have to stay up till 2, 3, 4 in the morning to study for this test. And what I tell them is, pause throughout the night and actually have a 10-minute conversation with a friend. You feel like that's a distraction from the task at hand, but when you plug back into that physiology of connection, into the calmness, into the joy, into the dopamine, the learning will be better. It'll be easier for you, right? You'll hold on to the information that you're even trying to digest in a more effective way.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I once heard that in studying for tests, you should study in the same position as you'll be in when you take the test, too. Like that
interesting.
If you're going to take it sitting, then you shouldn't be studying standing up and pacing. There's something about your body's memory of where you were.
That's sort of the neurons that wire together fire together, you have to assume, right? So that you want to that will be kind of a trigger, in a sense, and I mean that in a positive way, not a negative way, that it could, that position, my body knows what this is when I'm sitting like this. Yeah. Yeah, interesting.
And also what you were just saying about the high school kids reminds me a little bit of something I encourage my clients to do, which is to do like a buddy system when they're dating.
Absolutely.
So you have a check-in before and after, you kind of bookend your dates with support and love and care from your friends, and I've had clients do that with me. It really helps. And just building any kind of support into your life and asking for support and knowing that you can reach out to the friends who are there for you makes such a difference. Yeah.
Absolutely. Anything that you're kind of going out on a limb and feeling a little more vulnerable, right, than you might be comfortable with. If you have people in your life, just as you said, to bookend it, that makes all the difference in the world. All the difference, right? In literally the quality of experience you're going to have with that person, as well as the after or not. I mean, and when you really begin to think about that, right, and not think, oh, that's somebody who does that is really needy and dependent, right? If you start thinking really somebody who does that is just human, then it really gets built in a much different way, in a valued way. Yeah,
and I also think there's a lot of strength actually in vulnerability and in asking for help. It's not a weakness at all. Most of us are very bad at it because we think we have to stand alone, which is what we discussed at the beginning. It's that we are an island onto ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big mistake that people make, and that people don't realize. Somebody who came actually from Baltimore, and I live in Connecticut, who came the week that I was sitting Shiva for my father, and it so moved me that he made a 4.5-hour drive to pay his respects, and I thanked him today, and he said, "I just want you to know that I did it as much for me as I did for you. I wanted to be there," and I think people don't realize that right. By letting people do favors for you, you're actually helping them too. And there's this nice circle that that we reach out to each other, and you prevent people from having that pleasure of serving you when you keep saying that I don't need anybody.
That's right, and it really is a pleasure. It's a dopamine pleasure, right? You're absolutely right. Yeah. And if you could get yourself to think that you're actually, if you don't allow somebody to help you, you're actually depriving them of something real. Yeah. I mean, it's that's a fundamentally different way to look at being in the world and being in relationships.
Yeah, it's true.
Right.
Let me ask you a question. It's a little off topic of the relationships that we normally deal with, but I'm just curious. I actually recently encountered somebody who had Asperger's, and in people with Asperger's syndrome or autism don't have the same way of relating to people. Is this system at all helpful for people to improve their connection when they have autism or Asperger's?
That's actually a really great question, and the short answer is yes. And I think it can help in a number of ways. There is research being done with autism and Asperger's where literally you have the person kind of mimicking, very early on in life, facial expressions. Right? So one theory is that the mirror neuron system, it's not that they don't have mirror neurons, but that they're not as coordinated. They're not coordinating in a certain way, right, to allow them to read the social cues that they're seeing. And so literally having them mimic another person kind of connects them up in a way that they may be able to use it. So that's one thing that I would say. Certainly the other thing is, really for somebody who has Asperger's, really identifying very clearly for them, in a relational assessment, for instance, what does this relationship feel like? What do other people, how do you make sense of a healthy relationship? What would it look like is a good cognitive strategy, right? In teaching them about relationships. And, certainly a lot of the work that is done with people on the spectrum is about teaching them to read the signals, teaching them, right, both valuing what they bring to it, but also helping, it's a translational issue.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of adults need that kind of help even with when they're not on the spectrum.
That's right.
And
I think that's true.
I see, and especially in the dating world, I see so many people just misreading each other and not seeing themselves and not seeing the messages that they give out, and they're like, they the assessment that they make at the end of a date, two people can see the date in totally different ways because of their own inner workings and upbringing and all kinds of things, and it's really fascinating.
Isn't it? I was thinking the same thing, just as you were saying that, is how often we misread other people. I mean, one of the things, even around the resonance systems, that I have people do is, if you're out with a friend, do spot checks, right? Like just make an agreement. It might feel kind of, quirky and weird at first, but where you're going to stop throughout the afternoon or when you notice a change in the other person and actually say, okay, I noticed this. This is how I'm making sense of it. Is that right? And it's sort of like, there's the innate resonance where my body is going to respond to what I'm sensing from your body, but then there's the making sense of it, right? The mentalization, the putting putting words to it. And we often, kind of break down there because, of course, we usually make sense of it the way we make sense of our own experiences, right? Rather than really what theirs are. And, it really takes you from, I often talk, I don't know if you talk like this, but of there's one person and another person, and then there's the entity of the relationship, right, which is really a different entity, and you have to get pulled from your like fixed places into that kind of uncertain unknown zone where you're literally collaborating and building something brand new together, right?
It's really true. There's actually a lot of coaching around relationships and relationship systems, and when I was having some struggles with my daughter, who's the college student, I hired a coach to help me, and she had me sort of draw an imaginary triangle on the carpet and stand in the place of myself, then stand in the place of my daughter and see it from her eyes, and then stand in the place of just the relationship and hold the relationship. And it really helped me to see our relationship in a much more compassionate way and to understand her. And I think we often can't do that easily. So it's true. And who we become together in the relationship is very different than who we are in other relationships.
Absolutely, right? Each one is very specific. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all fascinating stuff.
It is.
So let's say people are in a toxic relationship. You have a friend who's in a bad marriage, or somebody you know who keeps dating the same person with a different face. Is there something you can do to help them, or people who are going through? I mean, a lot of people don't realize it. So can people, is there a way for people to do it in a politically correct way so that
I was going to say,
open?
Is it too easy to say, give them my book? Is that too easy?
Read this.
Right. Read this immediately. I certainly think that, if it's a good friend, that you could say, honestly, you could say that, you watch them get into these difficult relationships and get hurt over and over, and you're learning some things about relationship that you think might be helpful for them. It might not. I mean, don't put it out there. You don't, what don't you want to do? You don't want to shame them. You don't want them to feel like, oh my God, I'm never going to be good at relationships, right? But I do think, showing, number one, kind of naming it for them. I mean, it may be for people who really are in, repeatedly in bad relationships, sometimes they just don't even know that there's anything different, right? This is the template they get. It's sort of, and it fits and it gets into every single relationship, and they don't even know. So, it's sort of that taking the time to reach out to them and just say, I noticed this, not in a, oh, you're terrible, but just, I noticed this, and it's really painful to watch you get hurt over and over again. These are some things or resources or, that I actually recently have found helpful. I think that's a very generous thing to do for someone.
Yeah, I like the way you put it. And I'm glad you brought up the no shaming. Because that's often how people approach other people, and it comes across as you're wrong, I'm right, or you're hopeless or whatever, but it's not told from a place of love, or it's not conveyed with love and compassion. And I think that it's so important to say what your intention is when you're going to be confronting somebody about something this delicate.
Yeah. And what I would say is even the language of confronting, right, implies heading into it with your sympathetic nervous system, if not front and center, just behind you. And if you really come at it, it's sort of sharing. I want people to share feedback about me. I've always said this. It doesn't mean I always want to hear it. You know what I mean, or that it feels good to hear it, but I really honestly always want to hear it. And to really get that most people most people who are in relationships really would love to have the information they need to be in healthy relationships, right? They're reaching out there. It's like they're drinking salt water all the time. And it's got to be just enormously demoralizing and disheartening and depressing.
Well, I think a lot of people would like to be in better relationships, but they don't really want to hear the truth. It's really hard for people to hear and to do the work that's necessary, because it can feel really painful.
It can feel really, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. I think that, it's why a lot of people in my field end up quitting, because they feel that, that people keep saying they want help and they're not actually following through. And what were you going to say?
Well, you know what I was going to say. I was just kind of brought back to one of the things that I use in my therapy practice really all the time, and it's in the book. But I often think that people don't know what they don't know, right? So if you don't know what a healthy relationship would feel like, it's hard to even imagine what the change is like, right? So even if you say, okay, and you have to do this, practice doing this one task, in the relationship. And Jean Baker Miller, who was one of the founding scholars of relational cultural theory, came up with something called the 5 good things in a growth fostering relationship. And I use it particularly with the folks that have been traumatized, where their nervous system has paired relationship with threat, right? That pairing has happened. And I'll say, okay, you're not going to believe this, but this is how you would know if you're in a good relationship. And I give them the 5 good things. One is, and I ask them if they have somebody, can they try this on? But one is a sense of energy or zest, when you're in that relationship. 2 is that you have an ability to act. You feel more able to act on your own behalf, speak up, but also kind of out in the world. You have clarity about yourself and the other person and the relationship, so it's not that blurry who's what to whom feeling. So clarity. You have an increased sense of value in yourself. You actually, we're valued by another person, which allows us to feel value. And finally, you have a desire to be in more healthy relationships, and those are the 5 good things. And, we refer back to it over and over and over again as a template.
I love this because, and I remember reading it in the book, people often, if they haven't experienced a healthy relationship, they don't know what normal or healthy looks like. Exactly. And they normalize bad behavior. They make excuses for bad behavior. They think it's okay for people to speak down to them. And so it's so important to identify this, and this is so clear. And these, I think these are really resonant for me too. I would love to use these in my coaching. I think it's excellent. We are almost at the end of this hour. I can't believe we have 2 minutes left. So in these last 2 minutes, if you could share some parting words with our audience and any links you want to link to.
Sure. So the first thing I really wanted to kind of shout loud and clear is that our physiology works best when we're in healthy connection. If you can build relationships in your life that feel respectful, nurturing, mutual, your health is going to be better. Your mental health is going to be better. It's just such a win-win. So it's a goal to aspire to. I want everybody to remember that really the culture undermines this. And so part of the task is really identifying when you're hearing those messages from the culture that undermines it, right? When you're hearing somebody say, oh, I'm better standing on my own, or I don't need anybody, just to mark that as that's a message that that person has learned. So those are 2 things. The third thing is neuroplasticity tells us that our central nervous system is almost infinitely plastic and changeable. So this is a very doable thing, but you need the right set of instructions, right? You need the guidebook that gives you another way to do it, and that really is what I'm offering in my book. The websites that I would refer people to, the first is going to be jbmti.org. That's the Jean Baker Miller Training institute.org. That's the home of relational cultural theory. It's where my work comes from, Judy Jordan, Maureen Walker. We have lots of publications about relationships, about, from the micro to the macro. I offer a webinar series. I have one coming up actually starting next month, actually in 2 weeks now that I think of it, on 4 ways to click. It's going to be 4 sessions, and it models kind of the book. If people want to learn more about this, please tune in there. Let me think. What else? And all of our resources are there. We have institutes twice a year. So join us. I think there's a growing body of people. I think of it as the relational life raft, that growing body of organizations and people that really are putting relationships central. And I'm hoping that everybody will join in.
Well, this is wonderful. I really appreciate you coming on the air today, and your book is very valuable. People should go out and buy it, read it, do the assessments, and work on those neural pathways and rewire your brain. Thank you again for coming on.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
And,
have a good day.
Thank you all for listening in today, and I hope you all go on your last first date very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.